I think it's time we blow this scene. Get everybody in the stuff together. Okay, 3, 2, 1, let's jam.
Hi guys, welcome to the fully complete Mantle guide. This guide will cover pretty much everything about mantling from the very basics all the way through to the borderline useless and niche mantle tech. Even if you're already experienced with a lot of the early stuff, I recommend watching the video all the way through, as you may miss some information early on that becomes very important later. Once you initiate a mantle, you have 3 options. You can either A, fully climb the wall, B, do a mantle hop, or C, mantle cancel. Each of these options have very different quirks and properties to them that are really important to understand when utilizing mantles. Let's start with the most basic, mantle hops. You can perform this by pressing jump during the mantle animation, and this gives you a small hop upwards and backwards away from the wall. This is not as useful as the other 2 options, but it has its use cases, such as instantly hopping off of shorter walls for a quick speed boost. This can be done off some objects below the minimum climb height, but it's almost entirely useless. Mantle cancels are actually a pretty underused mechanic. There's quite a lot of not very well known tech around them that's actually pretty useful. One of these little things is the coyote time you get after cancelling a mantle. If you don't know what coyote time is, it's a mechanic that makes jumping off of ledges a bit more forgiving. After leaving a ledge, for 0.2 seconds, you are put in this state where you're falling through the air but are still able to jump. Doing this after a mantle lets you do some pretty freaky peaks. This gives you a window where you can lurch. This coyote time is actually how mantle jumping is performed. To perform a mantle cancel, you have to press a backward input during the mantle animation, or alternatively, you can move your camera left or right and press the corresponding input. This works because a left input while facing left will send you backwards from the wall, and so will a right input facing right. Finally, something that's good to know is there's actually a cooldown on mantles after mantle cancelling. Sadly, this doesn't really have a use at the moment though. Climbing out of mantles doesn't really have any interesting stuff about it, but wait, what's that? No. When climbing out of a mantle, you have an 150 millisecond window where you can input a superglide. Within that window, you have to press jump, then 1 frame later, press crouch. The easiest way of doing this is by binding crouch to a key above your spacebar, then pressing them with the same finger. The way superglides work is currently being explored in the Apex Rollouts channel of the Monkey Sniper Discord, but no one really knows how they work apart from a few theories. Now, as a lot of you guys are probably aware, there's a lot of stuff you can do with superglides. For starters, you can superglide forward, left, right, any diagonals, and something that's a little less known is you can actually do it backwards. To perform a straight backward superglide, you have to press a backward plus jump input on the frame you exit a mantle, then crouch 1 frame later. Or at least you had to, while slamming my frontal lobe into the firing range walls. I discovered that looking within 25 degrees of directly up will make the direction that your S input is going in be downwards and therefore outside the mantle cancel zone. This allows you to press S while hanging on a mantle without cancelling it, which makes backwards glides the same difficulty as every other superglide. Something funny about this is because you come out of the mantle while looking directly up, it looks like you've had a head-on collision with an oil tanker while driving in your Ford Row Cabriolet. They look dumb on your screen. The direction you glide in is based off the angle you're looking at, but it's important to keep in mind that pressing a sideways input and looking too far in that direction will cancel your mantle. When supergliding around the place, you've probably encountered this. This is called a dead glide, and occurs when your slide cooldown is exhausted during a superglide. If you didn't know, after entering a slide, a 2-second cooldown is started that prevents you from initiating a slide from a running position. Something else that's relatively unknown about superglides is they actually put you in a crouch state. This means that if you superglide then instantly enter a mantle, you'll still be in the crouch state when you exit this mantle. A good way to spot these crouch mantles is you'll see after I come out of the mantle, my velocity is quite low and my camera is slightly lower to the ground. Pay close attention to the difference between my velocity when exiting a crouch mantle and a normal one. This doesn't allow the mechanic that gives you the maximum running speed to take effect, and this stops you from chaining superglides. There are, however, a few ways to avoid this. One of which is by climbing before you enter the next mantle. You can do this by holding a side input and looking over around 15 degrees in the corresponding direction for a brief moment upon contact with the wall. You can also simply feather backwards inputs while in the air to land on the floor in front of the object to briefly reset your state. Both of these methods are also viable to wait up the 2-second slide cooldown to avoid dead glides. Now it's time for Superglide's wacky newborn cousin, Superground. A lot of you may have seen the Superground video I posted, and if you haven't, I recommend watching that. In that video I go over all the general mechanics behind this wacky tech, but since then it's been improved upon a lot. Supergrounds are a way to mantle, and in turn superglide off of very small objects that you can't normally mantle on. To perform a basic Superground, you have to melee to line up with an object, then press forward and jump at the same time to get an instant mantle off the object. This works because the player's collision box is pill-shaped. When jumping and moving forward at the same time, we enter a mantle just before the bottom of our collision box goes over the ledge. Another way of doing this is jumping straight up, then timing a forward input right before you hit the ground to get a mantle. This causes a similar thing to take place, it's just by coming down from a jump instead of going up. This alternative method is made easier by angling your camera diagonally so the forward input moves you towards the ledge slower. However, I still recommend using the first input as it's more practical. I find it easiest to bind a forward key above your spacebar, press them together, and then switch to your Superglide bind during the Mantle animation, and input a directional key to perform a glide. This is the point that tech was at the time of posting that video, but it has been improved upon a lot since then. Once that video came out, people started experimenting. It turns out, unknown to me at the time, holding jump while running lets you mantle a lot of short objects that are mantleable normally, just without pressing jump. Set3kh, I definitely pronounced that name wrong, used this mechanic to find a much easier way of mantling small ledges. Using the auto mantle mechanic behind holding space, he found that landing near a ledge and sliding over it while facing into the ledge and holding forward causes you to mantle it automatically. This is pretty useful, as it made jumping into Supergrounds while moving a lot more doable. One problem with this is that you enter the mantle in a crouch state. This is the same problem we have while chaining Superglides, except this time we can't climb the ledge to get rid of the problem, because the ledge is too small. Luckily, after landing without a slide, there's a small time where you rapidly lose momentum before coming to a stop. This sort of pseudo slide is really useful, as it allows this technique to still be done, just makes it a lot more precise. This method still isn't very useful though, as you have to jump just at the right time. Thankfully, there's another improvement that can be made. It turns out, we don't need that jump. This, although hard to perform at first, is finally actually useful. This can be done on any ledge in the game to get instant turnarounds or superglides. To perform this, press and hold a jump input. Run off the ledge you want to glide off, and then as soon as you reach the end of it, turn around while holding W, and if you time it right, you should get a mantle. Now let go of jump and press it again a frame before a crouch, right after you leave the mantle to Superground. I personally use a mouse button for the jump input before the mantle, but it's up to you what feels comfortable for you. You can do directional glides out of this, but you just have to change the direction you're holding during the mantle animation. The reason that this works is a bit confusing because Apex's code is made in a structure similar to Wagamama ramen noodles, but I'll try to explain everything in a way that makes sense. When holding down jump, the game is always checking to see if the player comes into contact with the ledge. Once you contact that ledge, if you meet the other requirements to mantle it, which is holding under the direction of the wall and facing it, it will go through one final check. To make sure that the ledge isn't too small for the player to mantle on, it checks to see if you're moving towards the ledge. This is because when an object is tall enough, you will stop at it as your pill collision box can't slide over it. We can get around this check by simply moving away from the ledge, but still facing and holding into it. Why is this the way they solved this issue? Very good question. Okay, now we're done with all the useful stuff. It's time for some niche and straight up weird tech that doesn't have many use cases. Starting off, this is this. I'm calling it the Geek Peak, and it's abusing a pretty unexplored mechanic. You may have noticed when playing the game that some stuff is mountable, mounting being this state, when other stuff isn't. The rules behind whether something is mountable don't really seem to have a pattern. For example, I can do it on this box, but not this ledge, even though this box is lower to the ground than a ledge. You might think, okay, maybe the slope has an effect on it, but this ledge, which is smaller and also on a slope, is mountable, whereas this one isn't. I have no clue what the rules are on whether this stuff is mountable or not. You sort of have to get a feel for it. If anyone wants to experiment here, you can contact me on Discord. Anyway, these unmountable ledges are what makes this weird stuff possible. Since you can't enter the mounted state, the game doesn't really know what to do in some situations. Since the mantle animation has no break in it, you can press backwards inputs while holding forward to move backward in the mantle without cancelling it. If you spam fast enough, you can go back and forth in the mantle animation and stay practically stagnant on the wall. This gets extra funky when we apply another specific rule of the game. If we start a mantle from our legs, the game puts us straight into the above the ledge part of the mantle. This is where our hands are above the ledge and we're just about to climb over. If we spam backwards inputs in this state, the game doesn't allow us to finish the climb because we keep moving backwards in the mantle. And since we aren't meant to be able to stay in this state, the game kinda breaks our animations. If we leave the mantle by holding backwards, we teleport to the ground. I suspect this is because we're never actually in the first part of the mantle animation, the game can't rewind it, so it just puts us in our position before entering the mantle, but I'm not really sure. This honestly looks really stupid, and apart from mental warfare, doesn't really have any useful cases in a fight. It's something funny to mess around with though. To perform this, I personally put my backward input on my right mouse and spam that. Scroll wheel inputs don't really work for this, as you need to be pressing backward for an equal amount of time as pressing forward. And since scroll wheel inputs last a frame, it isn't really efficient. If you're wondering why we can have our gun out while mantling, you'd be surprised to learn that the only thing that puts our gun away while mantling is entering the mounted state, and we can actually shoot during the entire mantle animation, even on ledges where the mount is available. If we don't stay in it, we keep our gun out. There are a few things I haven't fully explored yet, such as sticky mantles, where you stay in the mantle animation for way too long, and whatever this is. If anyone wants to explore this stuff, be my guest. If you find anything cool, you can contact my Discord. And that concludes the Mantle guide. A lot of time went into this, and half the stuff in this video was brought to my attention by a few people who know a lot more than I do. If you want to check them out, their channels will be in the description. I also want to thank the legends who recorded all the third person shots in this video, and I hope you learned something new. I've also started doing coaching on my Discord, but